The officer's voice sliced through the quiet morning like a blade. "Step off the bike unless you want me to assume you're more trouble than you look." Officer Harlan Graves already had his hand resting on his holster before the last word left his mouth. He circled the cherry red Ducati slowly, as if the motorcycle itself were evidence at a crime scene, a thin smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. Maya Ellison stepped off the bike without a word. She did not struggle. She did not raise her voice. She simply stood there in her black tank top, both hands visible at her sides, while the peaceful streets of Cedarwood Heights watched in uneasy silence. What Officer Graves could not have known was that the woman he treated like a criminal had spent 15 years making sure men like him were forced to answer for their choices. The cemetery lay still beneath the early light. Maya stood at her mother's grave, taking her time, counting each quiet moment the way the army had taught her to count everything: steps, breaths, heartbeats between moments of danger. She had never decided whether that habit was a gift or a burden. She placed a single white carnation against the headstone. Her mother had loved carnations. Maya did not cry. She had not cried in a very long time. She simply stood in the warm Florida air in her black riding jacket and gloves, letting the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. "Happy anniversary, Mama." Then she walked back to her motorcycle. The Ducati Panigale 5.4 was a fierce, beautiful machine, the kind built for speed and freedom. Maya had bought it not long ago, right at the beginning of her medical leave, the first real thing she had spent her army pay on in 15 years. The ankle was healed now. Surgery and physical therapy had done their work, and the doctors had cleared her weeks earlier. She had nothing left to recover from except the simple need to finish her leave on her own terms. The red bike had become the best part of every day. It was hers alone. No orders, no briefings, no one telling her where to point herself. Just the road, the engine, and the morning air moving past her at whatever speed she chose. For an hour each day, she was not a soldier counting down the days until she returned to duty. She was simply a woman on a red motorcycle moving through the world on her own terms. She needed that freedom more than she could explain to anyone who had never spent 15 years being told exactly where to go and when. Cedarwood Heights looked like something from a postcard. Wide green lawns, white houses with deep porches, old oak trees casting long shadows across streets so clean they seemed almost unreal. Maya had grown up just a short distance from here. She knew exactly what kind of neighborhood it was, and she knew exactly what kind of woman she appeared to be in it. She kept her speed steady and smooth, signaled every turn, both hands on the handlebars. Her Army veteran plate caught the morning light on the back of the bike. She turned onto Cedarwood Lane and allowed herself a slow breath. That was when she saw the patrol car. It pulled out from a side street and settled in behind her, matching her easy pace. A standard Cedarwood Heights cruiser, white and blue. Maya watched it in her mirror the way she watched everything. Quietly, steadily, her face unchanged. Maybe it's nothing, she thought. She already knew it wasn't nothing. After 2 blocks, the lights came on. Maya exhaled through her nose, checked her mirrors, signaled, and pulled smoothly to the curb. She cut the engine, removed her helmet, and set it on the tank in front of her. She sat up straight and placed her hands where they could be seen. 2 officers stepped out. The driver was a large man, broad through the shoulders and thick in the neck, the kind of face that had been told it was intimidating so often he had come to believe it. His name tag read Graves. He walked toward her with his right hand already on his holster, before she had moved an inch. Maya noted it, filed it, said nothing. The second officer, younger and leaner, with something eager and mean in his eyes, stayed near the front of the cruiser. His hand drifted toward the taser on his hip. He watched her the way people watch something they have already decided is a problem. She kept her hands still and her face neutral, feeling the familiar cold weight of being seen as a threat simply for existing in a place where someone had decided she did not belong. She had felt it before. In countries where people were actually trying to kill her, these 2 did not frighten her. Officer Graves stopped a short distance away. He looked at the bike. He looked at her. He did not look at her the way an officer looks at a citizen. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he has already judged. He crossed his arms. "This bike has been reported stolen." Maya met his gaze without flinching, without blinking, giving him nothing. That was always what they wanted first, a reaction they could use. "Reported stolen," she repeated, her voice flat and measured. "That's not correct. I own this motorcycle." She reached slowly into her jacket with 2 fingers and produced her license, registration, and insurance in one neat stack. 15 years of operating in places where the wrong move could end, everything had taught her to be precise in moments like this. Every motion visible, every action deliberate. She held the documents out to him. Graves took them, glanced at them the way someone glances at something they have already decided does not matter, and did not read them. He did not check the name against the registration. He simply held them loosely in one hand. "Where'd you get the bike?" "I bought it," Maya said evenly. "Cash, not long ago. My name is on the registration you're holding." Graves did not look at the papers. Behind her she could hear Officer Pierce moving, circling the Ducati slowly, studying it as if the machine itself were the offense, as if something so clean and red had no business belonging to a woman who looked like Maya. What exactly was the legal basis for the stop, she asked. Graves ignored the question. He pulled his radio from his shoulder and called in her plate number, his eyes drifting past her left ear as though she had not spoken at all. Maya noted it and filed it away. Pierce finished his circle and got on his own radio, speaking low, calling for backup. Maya heard every word. She did not react. There was nothing to react to. She was parked on a public street with every document in order, being treated like a suspect because two officers had decided that was what she was. This was not her first time in this situation. It was not even close. "Step off the bike," Graves said. "Am I being detained?" I said step off the bike. Maya held his gaze for a moment, then swung her leg over the frame and stood beside the Ducati, hands fully visible. She moved calmly, deliberately. She would not give him a single thing he could use against her. Graves walked back to the cruiser with her documents and ran the plate. Maya stood in the morning heat and waited. A neighbor across the street had been watering the lawn and had slowed, the hose still pointed at the grass while their eyes stayed on her. She did not look back. She kept her focus forward. The radio crackled. The response came back clean. The Ducati was registered to Maya M. Ellison. No flags, no warrants, nothing. She watched Graves's jaw tighten slightly as he listened. She watched him process the information and decide in real time that it did not matter. He walked back and handed her the documents without a word about what dispatch had confirmed. "Got a call," he said. "Neighbor reported a suspicious motorcycle riding through the area." "Suspicious how?" "Just suspicious." "That's not a legal basis for a continued stop, officer." Something shifted behind his eyes. Not uncertainty yet, just irritation. The irritation of a man accustomed to people accepting whatever he said and moving on. "You got priors?" he asked. The word hung between them. Maya looked at him steadily, taking in the set of his shoulders, the hand still on his holster, the flat certainty in his face, the face of a man who had been doing this for a long time and had never once been made to answer for it. She let the silence sit for a moment. "No," she said quietly. "Do you?" The air changed. Something went out of it. The easy confidence Graves had carried since he stepped out of the car faltered. His eyes narrowed, his chin came up. Maya looked straight back at him and did not move a muscle. "Watch your tone," he said, stepping closer. Maya did not move, did not blink. She simply looked at him with the same steady calm she had used in rooms where the stakes had been far higher than this. Pierce came in fast from the side, as if he had been waiting for any excuse. "Hands on the hood, right now." Maya looked at the hood of the patrol car, then at Pierce, then placed both palms flat on the warm metal, fingers spread, slow and deliberate. She complied. She always complied with physical directions. That was not the battlefield. The battlefield was what came next. She straightened as much as the position allowed, squared her shoulders, and spoke in a clear, caring voice, loud enough for the neighbor across the street to hear, loud enough for the woman who had just stepped onto her porch 2 houses down with her coffee. "I am complying under protest," she said, her voice steady as a ruler. "I am recording this interaction. I have broken no law. I am Sergeant First Class Maya Ellison, United States Army, currently on leave. I am also a JAG certified legal advocate, and I am formally invoking my right to know the legal basis for this continued detention." Graves's face flushed dark. "Nobody asked you to make a speech. Close your mouth." "That's not a legal instruction, officer." "I said I heard what you said." Maya kept her palms flat on the hood, eyes forward. "And I'm telling you clearly and on the record that I am recording this stop and that I expect a lawful answer to a lawful question." Graves moved to her left side. She could feel him in her peripheral vision. Close now, too close, the kind of closeness meant to intimidate rather than manage. He reached out and closed one hand around her wrist. "Here's what's going to happen," he began. "You're going to stop talking and I'm going to—" "I take your hand off her." The words came from Maya, quiet and certain. Not a threat, something colder, a statement of fact from someone who had already calculated the consequences and found them acceptable. Graves did not let go, but he slowed. "You have been recording this stop," Maya continued, "since the moment you pulled up behind me on Cedarwood Lane. So have I. My phone is mounted on the handlebars of that motorcycle, and it has been running the entire time. Every word you have said, every word Officer Pierce has said." She paused. "Every time your hand has gone to your holster." Pierce made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "I'm not finished," Maya said. "There's a second camera built into the collar of this jacket. It faces forward, has a wide field of view, and records in high definition. It has captured everything that has happened on the street since you activated your lights." Silence settled, real silence, the kind that carries weight. Graves's grip on her wrist went still. Maya let it sit for a moment, then continued. "Under Terry v. Ohio, a lawful investigative stop requires articulable reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. You ran my plate. It came back clean. The motorcycle is registered in my name. At that point, the legal basis for this stop was exhausted. Under Rodriguez v. United States, you cannot extend a stop beyond its original purpose without independent reasonable suspicion of a separate offense. You have none. Which means every second I have been standing here since that plate returned clean, is an unlawful seizure under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. She turned her head and looked directly at him. And all of it is on camera. Graves's hand dropped from her wrist. He said nothing. He simply stood there, this large, certain man who had approached her motorcycle with his hand on his holster and his mind already made up. For the first time since the stop began, he looked like someone unsure of his next move. Pierce stared from several feet away, his mouth slightly open. Maya straightened from the hood of the patrol car and turned to face them both. She waited. The street had grown quieter in a different way. More eyes were on them now. The neighbor across the street had stopped pretending to water the lawn and stood openly filming with a phone. The woman on the porch had been joined by an older man, arms crossed, watching. A car at the far end of the block had slowed and stayed. Graves felt it. Maya could see it in the way his shoulders shifted. He looked at her for a long moment, working through something behind his eyes, the calculation, the weighing of options, the slow and unhappy arrival at a conclusion he did not want. He glanced at the handlebar mount on the Ducati, glanced at the collar of her jacket, looked back at her face, then he took a single step back. "You're free to go," he said. Just like that, no explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement that he had held her wrist or that the plate had come back clean long before any of this escalated. He said it the way someone closes a door, like whatever had happened before no longer counted. He turned and walked toward the patrol car. Maya did not move. "I need your badge numbers," she said to his back, "and your supervisor's contact information." Graves stopped. His back was still to her. "That is my legal right," Maya said. "Both of you." He turned slowly. The flush in his face had settled into something harder, not embarrassment anymore, but something that looked like a promise. He reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a card, and held it out without walking it over. Maya crossed the distance herself and took it from his hand. Pierce pulled a card from his own pocket and held it out at arm's length, the way someone offers something to an animal they do not want to approach. His eyes were flat and mean. He said nothing. Maya took his card as well. She stood on the sidewalk in the Florida morning heat and wrote down every number, every name, the badge numbers from both chests, the patrol car number from the rear panel, and the time on her phone. She wrote slowly. She wrote everything. She was aware of Graves watching her from beside the driver's door. She was aware of Pierce's silence, which was louder than anything he could have said. When she finished, she folded the paper and put it in her jacket pocket. "Thank you," she said, not warm, not cold, simply precise. She put her helmet on, fastened the chin strap, swung her leg over the Ducati, and started the engine. She did not rush. She signaled before she pulled away from the curb. She kept to the speed limit, the entire length of Cedarwood Lane, while the patrol car sat motionless behind her. She did not look in the mirror once. Victor Ellison's house was a short ride from Cedarwood Heights. Maya took the long way, not because she was lost, but because she needed the road beneath her for a little longer before she went inside and became a woman with a problem to solve. She parked the Ducati in the driveway and sat for a moment after she cut the engine. The neighborhood was quiet. Birds sang somewhere. A lawnmower hummed in the distance. She pulled off her helmet, held it in both hands, and breathed. Then she went inside. The footage was better than she had expected. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and both cameras connected, going through every second of it twice. The handlebar camera had captured Graves's approach, his hand on the holster, his face, his body language, and every word from the moment he reached her. The jacket camera had captured everything from the front, her hands on the hood, Graves's grip on her wrist, Pierce's position, the arrival of the neighbors. The audio was clean. Every word was clear. She watched herself cite case law to two officers who had no answer for any of it. She watched Graves's hand drop. She watched his face change. She closed the footage window and opened a new document. Formal complaint. Cedarwood Heights Police Department, Internal Affairs Division. She typed steadily, every fact in order, every violation named correctly. When she finished, she read it back once, made 2 small corrections, and saved it. She would submit it first thing in the morning. She closed the laptop and looked out the kitchen window at the driveway where the red Ducati sat cooling in the afternoon sun. They have no idea what they just started. Maya was already awake when her father appeared in the kitchen doorway in his robe and slippers, phone in one hand, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. His face was tight in a way she had not seen since her mother's funeral. "Don't submit that yet," he said, nodding at her laptop. "Something's happened." She pushed her coffee aside and turned the laptop to face the wall. "Sit down, Dad." He sat. She listened without interrupting. That was another thing the Army had trained into her, the ability to receive bad news without letting it show on her face, even when someone was watching. Victor told her first about the video. The neighbor across the street, the one who had been filming openly, had posted several minutes of footage the previous evening, not the whole stop, just the end of it. Maya citing case law, Graves's hand on her wrist, Pierce's flat stare, and the moment Graves stepped back and told her she was free to go, it had already spread widely. "Okay," Maya said. "That's not the part you need to worry about," Victor said. She waited. Graves had filed his report the previous afternoon, hours before the video went up, hours before Maya had even finished typing her complaint. He had gotten there first. He had sat at his department computer while she was still riding home and put his version of events on the official record before she could put hers anywhere. Maya pulled up the department's public statement while her father talked. Chief Roland Crowe had released it the previous evening after the video had already begun spreading. She read it slowly. The statement said the officers had conducted a lawful investigative stop in response to a citizen complaint about a suspicious motorcycle. It said the subject had been uncooperative and had escalated the encounter through threatening and erratic behavior. The department stood fully behind its officers. And at the very bottom, in 2 short sentences clearly meant to preempt the footage, it noted that both officers' body cameras had experienced a technical malfunction during the stop and that the recordings were inconclusive. Both cameras, same stop, same malfunction. Maya stared at those sentences for a long moment. Victor leaned forward. There's more. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Someone connected to the police union, Victor did not have a name yet, only a source he trusted, had contacted her army base the previous evening. They had submitted a formal written inquiry to her commanding officer suggesting that her behavior during the stop raised questions about her fitness for continued active duty service. The inquiry used words like volatile, confrontational, and pattern of aggression. They contacted my base, Maya said quietly, last night, before the statement even went out. She looked at her father across the table, in the house where she had grown up, in the kitchen where he had made her breakfast every morning before school. 15 years of service, 3 deployments, a record without a single mark. And in less than a day, 2 officers who had illegally detained her on a public street had filed a false report, convinced their chief to back them publicly, buried their own evidence behind a malfunction story, and reached all the way into her military career, all because she knew her rights, all because she had not flinched. Dad, she said quietly, how many days do I have left? She already knew the answer. She had been counting since the day the doctors cleared her ankle. Victor looked at her for a moment before he answered, a few weeks? Maya set her phone face down on the table and looked at her hands, the same hands that had drafted legal briefs in the field, loaded magazines in the dark, held things together when everything around her was coming apart. A few weeks. She almost smiled. That was more than enough. She gave herself a short time to feel the anger fully, the cold fury of being lied about in an official report, the particular violation of having her military record used as a weapon against her, the exhausting recognition that this was exactly how it always went for women who looked like her when they stood up to men who looked like them. She felt it completely. She did not push it down or dress it up. Then the time passed, and she pulled her legal pad to the center of the table, uncapped her pen, and wrote 3 names at the top of the page: Captain Lena Vargas, Rachel Monroe, Graham Ellis. She drew a line beneath them and got to work. Lena Vargas picked up on the second ring. I already saw it, she said before Maya could speak. Her voice carried the same calm it always had in the field, solid all the way through. All of it, the video, the department statement, the union inquiry to your base. I've been up since before dawn. I know what you need. I'm already on it. Lena's papers moved on the other end of the line. I've contacted JAG about the inquiry. The timing alone is a problem for them. They filed it the same night you were stopped, before any formal complaint process was initiated. That's not concern for conduct standards. That's retaliation, and I'm going to make sure it's documented as exactly that. Maya exhaled slowly. Lena, don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. You know that. I know. Good, I'm going to get you a name. Civilian attorney, civil rights, federal level. Someone who can take what you have on those cameras and build something that doesn't go away quietly. A pause. How are you holding up? Maya looked across the kitchen at her father, who was moving between the stove and the counter with the careful motions of a man trying to make himself useful when there was nothing useful he could do. I'm fine, she said. I'm focused. That's my soldier, Lena said and hung up. Not long after, Lena sent a name and a number. Rachel Monroe, civil rights attorney in Tampa. Call her. Maya called. Rachel answered with the kind of professional directness that skipped pleasantries and went straight to substance. Maya walked her through the full stop, every detail in order, from the moment the lights came on to the moment she rode away. Rachel listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, Rachel said, "Send me both recordings, unedited, full length tonight." Maya sent them within the hour. Rachel called back the next morning. I've watched everything twice, the plate return, the continued detention, the physical contact with your wrist, all of it on camera, all of it clean. And the false report filed against someone with documented recordings that directly contradict it. A brief pause. This is a federal civil rights case, Sergeant Ellison, a strong one. I'd like to represent you. When can you start? I already have, Rachel said. The second call went to Graham Ellis, a Tampa investigative journalist Maya had crossed paths with during an Army legal matter several years earlier. A thorough man, careful, the kind who checked everything twice and published nothing he could not defend line by line. She sent him both videos with a single instruction: hold them. Don't publish anything yet. I'll tell you when. Graham confirmed receipt and asked no questions. He understood how to wait. The third move took little time and required no phone call. Maya typed a formal written public records request to the Cedarwood Heights Police Department citing Florida's public records law, requesting the full complaint history filed against officers Harlan, Graves, and Pierce for the past several years. She printed it, signed it, photographed it, and sent it by both email and certified mail. She saved the confirmation receipts in the folder on her laptop labeled evidence. Then she closed the laptop and looked out the kitchen window. 3 moves in 2 days. Clean, sequenced, deliberate, each one laying the foundation for the next. A few weeks of leave remaining, time enough to build something they could not walk away from. Now she waited and watched to see what the department would do. The union representative appeared on local news the next morning sitting across from a Tampa anchor with his hands folded and the practiced look of a man who had done this before and expected it to work the same way it always had. What we saw in that video, he said, was a small portion of a longer encounter taken completely out of context. Our officers followed proper procedure at every step. What you're not seeing, what that video deliberately doesn't show, is the level of aggression and hostility they were dealing with from the very beginning of that stop. When the anchor asked about the clean plate return, the representative smiled patiently. A stolen vehicle report had been called in. Our officers were doing their jobs. The fact that the plate came back clean doesn't mean the stop wasn't lawful. It means it was resolved the way it was supposed to be. And the body camera malfunction? Equipment failures happen. It's unfortunate timing, but that's all it is. Maya watched the entire segment without moving from the kitchen table. When it ended, she finished her coffee and went to refill it. Victor stood in the doorway, his jaw tight. "Don't," Maya said quietly without turning around. "Save it." By midday, the talk radio had started. She did not listen herself. Victor told her about it, his voice growing tighter with every sentence. A local host had spent a long segment on her that morning, calling her combative, saying she had gone looking for a confrontation and found one. He said any reasonable person would have simply cooperated with the officers and been on their way quickly. She wants to throw legal terminology at 2 cops doing their jobs because she thinks that makes her special. It doesn't make her special. It makes her difficult. Maya wrote the host's name on her legal pad and underlined it once. The social media campaign started quietly and built fast. She found the first post in the afternoon, an anonymous account describing her as a troubled soldier using her medical leave to pursue a personal vendetta against law enforcement. It had already spread. She found the second one an hour later. Different account, same pattern, suggesting her legal knowledge was rehearsed, that she had staged the stop deliberately, riding into that neighborhood specifically to provoke an encounter she could film. By evening, there were multiple posts she could identify, each from a different anonymous account, each hitting the same notes with the same language in a way that did not happen by accident. Volatile, aggressive, troubled. The same words from the union's inquiry to her base, the same words Graves had put in his report. One post, the one that spread furthest, the one that made Victor put his phone face down on the table and walk out of the room, said, "A soldier with anger management issues is on leave in your neighborhood. Ask yourself, is that someone you feel safe around?" Maya read it twice. She felt the specific cold burn of it, the way it was crafted to make her race and her service work against her at the same time, to turn the thing she had spent 15 years building into evidence of danger rather than proof of character. She screenshotted it. She screenshotted all of them and saved them to the folder. The letter from Cedarwood Heights PD Internal Affairs arrived in the late afternoon mail. Victor brought it to the kitchen table without a word. It was 4 sentences long. It acknowledged receipt of her complaint. It assigned a case number. It stated that her complaint would be reviewed in accordance with departmental procedure. It said she would be contacted if additional information was required. 4 sentences, a case number, no timeline, no investigator's name, no acknowledgement of the footage she had attached or the specific violations she had documented. Maya read it once, then she photographed it and added it to the evidence folder. She closed the laptop and sat back in her chair. The machine had turned on her the way machines always turned on people who challenged them. Loudly, quickly, and from every direction at once. She had known it was coming. She had been counting on it. The envelope arrived several days after she had sent the public records request by certified mail and email. Several days of watching the social media campaign grind forward, of monitoring the department's public silence, of adding items to the evidence folder every morning like a soldier cataloging ammunition before a battle. Victor brought it in from the mailbox without opening it and set it on the kitchen table in front of her. It was thicker than she had expected. That was either a good sign or a bad one. She opened it carefully and spread the contents flat. It was not the full response, she knew that immediately. The cover letter stated that certain materials had been withheld pending legal review and that additional records would be provided within the time permitted under Florida statute. Maya set the cover letter aside and read what they had sent. It took her a little while to read through everything. When she finished, she sat very still for a moment. Then she went back to the beginning and read it again, slower this time, making notes on her legal pad in her small, precise handwriting. 6 prior complaints against Officer Harlan Graves over several years, 4 against Officer Pierce, every single one dismissed. Every single dismissal carried the same notation, word for word, year after year. Complaint reviewed and found to lack merit. IAD. No investigator's name, no summary of findings, no explanation of what had been reviewed or how the conclusion had been reached. Just that one line stamped at the bottom of each complaint form like a rubber seal applied without reading what was underneath it. Maya underlined the notation on the first complaint, then the second, then the third. By the fourth, she stopped underlining and simply stared at the page. This was not a coincidence. This was a system. Someone had decided at some point that this was how complaints against these 2 officers would be handled, not investigated, not reviewed in any meaningful sense, just processed and buried under administrative language designed to look like due diligence. She kept reading. 3 of Graves's 6 complaints had been filed by black motorists. She noted that without comment, simply wrote the number on her legal pad and circled it. The 5th complaint stopped her. It had been filed several years earlier. The complainant's name was Elias Thornton, age listed as 68 at the time of filing, address on Birchwood Drive, Cedarwood Heights, 2 streets from where Maya had been stopped. She read his complaint slowly. Thornton had been riding a motorcycle, a dark blue Kawasaki, through the same neighborhood on a Sunday morning when Graves pulled him over. Graves had approached with his hand on his holster, had informed Thornton the bike had been reported stolen, had dismissed Thornton's documentation without properly reviewing it, had detained him on the side of the road for an extended period while he waited for backup that was not needed for any lawful reason Maya could identify. When the second unit arrived and confirmed the plate, Graves had handed Thornton back his documents and walked away. No explanation, no apology, nothing. Thornton had written his complaint in careful, precise longhand. He had attached a copy of his registration. He had noted Graves's badge number, the patrol car number, and the time of the stop down to the minute. He had done everything right. The dismissal notation at the bottom of his complaint was identical to every other one in the stack. Complaint reviewed and found to lack merit. IAD. Maya set the paper down. Victor had been reading over her shoulder for the last several minutes. She had heard him go still somewhere around the 3rd complaint and had not heard him move since. Now she looked up at him. His face had changed, not the tight, controlled anger she had been watching for days, but something older, something that looked like recognition. Dad? You know this name? Victor reached out and picked up Thornton's complaint form. He read it for a moment, though she could tell he did not need to. Elias Thornton, he said quietly. We've gone to the same church for many years. He set the paper down, picked up his phone, and dialed without looking up the number. It rang twice. Elias, Victor said. It's Victor Ellison. My daughter needs to meet you. Elias Thornton's house was exactly 2 streets from where Maya had been stopped. She noticed the distance when she turned onto Birchwood Drive the following morning. The same oak trees, the same clean sidewalks, the same manicured lawns, the same neighborhood, the same quiet that had surrounded her on Cedarwood Lane when the patrol car fell in behind her. She parked in front of the well-kept house with its white trim and small garden along the front path. A wooden rocking chair sat on the porch with the settled look of something used every day. She was still reaching for the door handle when the front door opened. Elias Thornton was already there. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders in the way of someone who had been athletic once and still carried the frame of it. He had close-cropped white hair and reading glasses hanging from the collar of his shirt. He looked at Maya from the porch with an expression she recognized, the careful, measuring look of someone who had learned not to extend trust quickly because the cost of misplacing it was too high. She stepped out of the car and walked up the front path. Mr. Thornton, I'm Maya Ellison, Victor's daughter. He studied her for a moment, then something in his face shifted. Not quite relaxing, but settling, like a decision made. I know who you are. I've seen the video. He pushed the screen door open. Come inside. He led her to his kitchen table. It was already set for the conversation. A thick manila folder sat in the center, worn at the edges from being opened and closed many times over many years. A yellow legal pad lay beside it. A pen rested straight across the top. He had been waiting for this meeting long before Victor called. Sit down, he said. She sat. He sat across from her, folded his hands on the table, and began. His account was methodical and precise in a way that told Maya he had told it to himself many times, had kept it sharp and accurate in his memory the way you keep something sharp when you believe it will matter someday. It had been a Sunday morning several years earlier. He had been riding his Kawasaki through the neighborhood, a route he had ridden every Sunday for a couple of years. Graves had pulled out behind him on the same stretch of road where Maya had been stopped. Same lights, same approach, hand on the holster before a single word was spoken. "The bike has been reported stolen." The same words, the exact same words. Thornton had produced his license, registration, and insurance. Graves had held them without reading them, had run the plate, had received the clean return, had kept Thornton standing on the side of that road for an extended period while he waited for backup that was not needed for any lawful reason. When the second unit arrived and confirmed the plate, Graves had handed Thornton back his documents and walked away. No explanation, no apology, nothing. Thornton had filed his complaint that same afternoon. "I believed in the process," he said. His voice was even, not bitter. Something past bitter, something that had moved through bitterness and come out the other side into a hard, clear place. "I was a school teacher for more than 30 years. I taught civics. I taught my students that the system had mechanisms, that if you used them correctly, they worked." He looked at the folder on the table. "I used them correctly." He opened the folder and turned it to face Maya, the original complaint form, the IAD dismissal letter, several pages of handwritten notes in a teacher's careful script, and at the back, 3 photographs taken on his phone the day of the stop, showing the patrol car, the street, and Thornton standing beside his Kawasaki. He had documented everything, just like Maya, and it had made no difference at all. She called Rachel from the car before she had even reached the end of Birchwood Drive. She laid out everything. Thornton's account, his documentation, the identical language of his dismissal, the identical profile of his stop. Rachel listened without a word. When Maya finished, Rachel was quiet for a moment. "I'm filing the federal complaint today," she said. "Under 42 U.S.C. section 1983, Graves, Pierce, and the department." "How does this change things?" "It changes everything," Rachel said. "One incident is an allegation. 2 identical incidents, same officer, same neighborhood, same profile, same dismissal. That's a documented pattern, and a documented pattern is something a federal court takes very seriously." Maya stared at the road ahead. "File it," she said. Graham Ellis published early the next morning. Maya was already awake when her phone lit up with his message. "It's live. 2 words." She opened the link and read the entire piece at the kitchen table while the coffee brewed and the house was still quiet around her. It was thorough. It was precise. It was exactly the kind of journalism that did not editorialize because it did not need to. The facts were doing all the work. Graham had run both unedited videos side by side with the text of Graves's official report. The contradictions were not subtle. They were structural. The report described Maya as erratic and threatening at the exact moments the footage showed her standing with her hands visible, speaking in a level voice, citing case law. The report claimed both officers had attempted to de-escalate. The footage showed Graves's hand closing around her wrist. The body camera malfunction section was its own paragraph. Graham had pulled the department's equipment maintenance records through a separate public records request, records the department apparently had not thought to protect. The records showed that Graves's body camera had malfunctioned during 2 prior incidents involving complaints. Pierce's had malfunctioned once before. All 3 prior malfunctions had occurred during stops that resulted in dismissed complaints. Graham had not used the word pattern. He had not needed to. The numbers spoke for themselves. Elias Thornton's account ran in full, his photographs, his complaint form, the dismissal notation, more than 30 years as a school teacher, and the system he had taught his students to trust had handed him a rubber stamp and called it justice. Maya read that section twice. By mid-morning, the story had been picked up by national outlets. By late morning, it was everywhere. Victor sat at the kitchen table with his phone and read the headlines aloud, one after another, in a voice that started controlled and grew quieter as the list grew longer. Not quieter from sadness, but from something that looked like awe. The particular awe of a man who had watched something be ignored for 40 years and was now watching the same thing become impossible to ignore. By early afternoon, several hundred people had gathered on the sidewalk outside the Cedarwood Heights Police Department. Maya watched the live stream on her laptop. The crowd was orderly and loud. People held handmade signs. An older woman near the front held a photograph of Elias Thornton, his face printed on poster board, his name written underneath in large letters. Maya's phone had stopped being manageable around midday. She turned off the notifications and set it face down. Chief Crow called a press conference for late afternoon. Maya, Victor, and Lena Vargas, who had driven down from base that morning and was now sitting in Victor's armchair with her shoes off and her reading glasses on, watched it live on the television in the living room. Crow stood at a podium in front of the department seal. He was a large man who had clearly spent the day trying to look smaller, shoulders drawn in, voice carefully measured, the practiced posture of someone who had legal counsel standing just off camera. He said the department took all allegations of misconduct seriously. He said the safety and dignity of every resident of Cedarwood Heights was his personal priority. He said that in light of the serious questions raised by the published reporting, he was placing officers Graves and Pierce on administrative leave, effective immediately pending a full internal review. The crowd outside the building, visible on a second live stream Maya had opened on her laptop, erupted, cheering, sustained, and genuine, the sound of people who had been waiting for something and had finally heard it. Victor exhaled slowly. He put his hand flat on his knee and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Maya felt it too, the sudden loosening in her chest, the pull toward relief. It had worked. The footage, Thornton's account, Graham's reporting, Rachel's federal complaint, all of it had moved something that had looked completely immovable just days earlier. She almost let herself believe it was over. Lena reached over and refilled her coffee from the pot on the end table without looking up from the television. Then she said quietly and without particular emotion, "Administrative leave with pay isn't accountability, that's a vacation." The loosening in Maya's chest tightened again. She knew. She had always known. But she had let herself feel it for a moment, and she did not regret that. She looked through the living room window at the driveway, at the red Ducati parked in the afternoon shadow of her father's oak tree. A few weeks of leave remaining. The crowd outside the department was still cheering. Enjoy it, Maya thought. This part doesn't last. They waited until Friday. Maya had expected that. In her experience, institutions always buried their bad news on Friday afternoons, late enough that the morning news cycle had already closed, early enough to claim they had not delayed. By the time anyone organized a response, it was the weekend, and weekends had a way of cooling things down that Monday mornings rarely reversed. She was sitting at the kitchen table with Rachel on the phone and Victor across from her when the department's press release hit her email late in the afternoon. She read the subject line once, Internal Affairs Review, Findings and Determination. "It's here," she said. Rachel said, "Read it to me." The report was several pages long and said almost nothing. The language was careful in the way language is careful when it has been written by someone whose primary goal is to be unquotable. Every sentence hedged, every conclusion arrived at through passive constructions that made it impossible to identify who had decided what or on what basis. The findings were as follows. The stop had been conducted within departmental guidelines. The initial approach had been consistent with standard procedure for a stolen vehicle call. Maya's detention following the clean plate return had been brief and had not constituted an unlawful seizure under applicable Fourth Amendment standards. Officer Graves's written report had accurately reflected the encounter as he perceived and experienced it. The body camera malfunction had been reviewed by the department's technical division and determined to be an equipment failure unrelated to officer conduct. The malfunction had affected both units simultaneously due to a shared firmware update installed earlier that week. Both officers had been found to have acted within the scope of their duties and in accordance with departmental policy. Effective immediately, Officers Graves and Pierce were reinstated to full active duty. Maya read the last line twice. Then she set her phone flat on the table and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "They cleared them," she said. Rachel's voice on the other end of the line was steady. "I know. Keep reading. There's a second document attached." The second document was addressed to the Florida Bar's Grievance Board. The department's attorney, Edison Bryson, had filed a formal complaint against Rachel Monroe. The complaint alleged that Rachel had improperly obtained and publicly released confidential internal complaint records through her public records request in violation of attorney conduct standards. It requested a full grievance investigation and cited several bar rules. Maya read it carefully. Every word of it was precise and deliberate, written not to win, she understood, but to consume. A grievance investigation would take months. It would require Rachel to respond, to document, to defend herself before a board while simultaneously building a federal civil rights case. It was designed to divide her attention and shadow her credibility at exactly the moment it mattered most. "How serious is this?" Maya asked. "It's frivolous," Rachel said. "The records were obtained through a lawful public records request. They know that. But frivolous cases still require responses, and responses take time." A pause. "They're trying to slow me down, can they?" "No," Rachel said simply, flatly, the way Lena spoke when a question had only one answer. "No, they cannot." The third blow arrived not long after. Victor was in the kitchen when his phone rang. He looked at the screen, then looked at Maya. The expression on his face told her everything before he said a word. It was Lena. The Army inquiry had escalated. Maya's commanding officer had received an official formal request. Not an inquiry anymore, but a structured review asking whether her conduct during the stop was consistent with the standards expected of active duty personnel. The review had a response deadline. It was real and moving, and it had enough institutional weight behind it now that Lena's JAG contacts could not simply dismiss it without a formal response of their own. Maya's return to duty was no longer certain. The room was very quiet when Victor put the phone down. She sat at the kitchen table with 3 documents open on her phone screen: the IAD clearance, the bar complaint against Rachel, and Lena's text summarizing the Army review, and felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since the morning this all began. Not fear, not defeat, something colder and more focused than either of those things. The feeling she got in the field when the situation had deteriorated past the point of a controlled response and required something different entirely, a few weeks of leave remaining. Enough, she thought. We do this now. Victor made dinner. Maya did not ask him to. He simply got up from the table after she put her phone down and went to the kitchen and started cooking. That was what he did when things were bad, when her mother was sick, when Maya shipped out for her first deployment, when the call came that she had been injured overseas. He cooked. He needed his hands busy and his back to the room so nobody could see his face while he got himself together. She let him. She sat at the table with the 3 documents still open on her phone and listened to the sounds of the kitchen, the tap running, the refrigerator opening and closing, the particular rhythm of Victor Ellison making something out of whatever was available, because the act of making something was the only thing he could control right now. Not long after, he set a plate in front of her, rice and beans and fried plantains, the meal he had made her every Friday night of her childhood. She looked at it for a moment. "Dad," she said quietly. "Eat first," he said. She ate. He sat across from her when his own plate was half finished and put his fork down and looked at her the way he had looked at her across this same table her whole life, directly, without softening, because Victor Ellison had never believed that kindness required dishonesty. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I know. Let me say it anyway." He folded his hands on the table. "I have watched this department operate for 40 years, Maya. 40 years. I watched them do this to people in this neighborhood before you were born. I watched them do it when you were a child sitting right where you're sitting now. I watched them file complaints in the trash and put good people through hell for the crime of knowing their rights." His voice was even and quiet and carried the particular weight of someone reporting facts rather than feelings. "They have a system. It isn't broken. It works exactly the way it was designed to work, which is to exhaust people until they give up." Maya watched her father's face. "They have Bryson and whatever attorneys the union is paying. They have Crow running interference. They have the IAD process in their pocket. And now they have the Army review moving with a deadline attached." He looked at her steadily. "Their whole strategy, the false report, the bar complaint against Rachel, the union inquiry to your base, none of it is designed to win an argument. It's designed to run the clock. They know you have a few weeks. They know when you go back to base, this loses momentum. Cases without momentum get settled quietly or dropped entirely." He paused. "That is how they have always won." The kitchen was quiet around them. The old clock above the sink ticked. Maya looked at the wall beside the refrigerator where her mother's calendar still hung, the same calendar that had been there since the year before she died, never taken down because Victor could not bring himself to do it. June. Her mother had stopped at June. She thought about Elias Thornton at the same kitchen table 2 streets over, alone with his folder and his careful notes and his faith in a process that had already decided not to see him. She thought about whoever came after her if she walked away, whoever rode through this neighborhood next year, next month, next week, and got lights in their mirror and a hand on a holster and a lie filed in their name before they could get home. She thought about that person not having footage, not having Rachel, not having Lena, not knowing the case law, or having a father who knew Elias Thornton's phone number. She looked at her hands flat on the table. 15 years of everything those hands had done. Every brief drafted under fire. Every position held when holding it seemed impossible. Every moment she had been told that the situation was beyond recovery and had found a way through it anyway. A few weeks left. She looked up at her father. Victor was watching her with the patient, certain expression of a man who had raised a soldier and was waiting for her to remember what she was. "Then I use every single day," Maya said. Her voice was quiet and level and left no room for any other interpretation. "We end this fast. We end it loud." She held her father's gaze across the table where she had done her homework and eaten countless Friday night dinners and grown into the woman she was. "And we make sure they can never do it to anyone again." Victor looked at her for a long moment, then he picked up his fork and finished his dinner. Lena arrived early the next morning with a legal pad, a thermos of her own coffee, and the focused, unhurried energy of a woman who had spent decades solving problems that other people had already declared unsolvable. She sat at Victor's kitchen table, uncapped her pen, and looked at Maya across the table. "Tell me everything we have," she said, "from the beginning. Leave nothing out." Maya talked for a long while without stopping. The stop, the footage, the false report, Graves' history, Thornton's account, the IAD clearance, the bar complaint against Rachel, the Army review with its deadline, all of it laid out in order, clean and precise, the way she would brief a mission. Lena listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, Lena looked down at her legal pad where she had been making notes in her small, dense handwriting. She studied them for a moment, then she said, "Okay, here's how we take this apart." Victor had been sitting quietly at the far end of the table with his coffee and a folder of his own. He had been building something over the past several days, quietly, methodically, in the way he did everything, pulling on threads that 40 years of living in Cedarwood Heights had put in his hands. He opened the folder and set 3 documents on the table. Edison Bryson, the department's attorney, the man who had filed the bar complaint against Rachel, had represented the Cedarwood Heights PD in 3 prior civil rights settlements. All 3 had been sealed. All 3 had been paid out of municipal funds without any admission of wrongdoing from the department. Victor had found references to 2 of them buried in city council budget minutes from prior years, line items described only as legal settlements, civil matters, and had tracked down a retired city clerk who remembered a third, 3 sealed settlements. The same attorney, the same department, a pattern of paying quietly to make things disappear rather than changing anything that produced the complaints in the first place. Maya looked at the documents, then she looked at Lena. Lena was already reaching for her phone. The call took a long while. Lena's contact at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division was a woman named Lorna Morse, whom Lena had worked with years earlier during an Army investigation with civilian jurisdiction overlap. Maya sat across the table and listened to Lena lay out the full picture: Thornton's case, Maya's case, the multiple dismissed complaints, the 3 sealed settlements, the systematic IAD burial process, the coordinated reinstatement, and the retaliatory Army inquiry, in the same methodical, unemotional tone she used to brief senior officers. When Lena finished, Lorna Morse asked 4 questions. Lena answered all 4. Then Morse said she had enough to open a preliminary review under the pattern or practice statute. She said she would need the documentation Victor had sourced, the complaint records Maya had obtained, and Rachel's federal filing. She said if the preliminary review confirmed what she was hearing, a full federal investigation would follow. Lena said it will confirm it. Morse said she would be in touch within 2 days. Lena ended the call and set her phone on the table. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. "That's move 1, Lena said. Move 2 happened that same afternoon. Lena's JAG contacts had been working the Army review since she first flagged it. What they had built over the past several days was a precise documentary timeline, every date, every filing, every communication, that established one fact with complete clarity. The union's initial inquiry to Maya's base had been filed the same evening as the traffic stop, before Maya had submitted any formal complaint, before any conduct review process had been initiated through proper channels. The inquiry had not followed a complaint, it had preceded one. It had not been a response to Maya's behavior. It had been a preemptive strike designed to damage her standing before she could use it. That was not a conduct concern, that was retaliation. And retaliation against a service member for exercising constitutional rights was a problem the Army took seriously in a way that the Cedarwood Heights PD did not. Lena filed the formal JAG response that evening. The Army review was suspended pending the federal investigation's findings. Maya's record, 15 years untouched, was formally protected, her return to duty date held. When Lena told her, Maya sat very still for a moment. "It's not over," Lena said immediately. "Don't let it feel over." "I know," Maya said. She did know, but she let herself feel it for a few seconds, the particular relief of watching something she had built for 15 years survive an attack designed to destroy it. Then she picked up her phone and called Elias Thornton. "Elias," she said, "it's time." Elias Thornton opened the door before Maya reached the porch. He had been expecting her. She could tell by the way he stood. Coat already on, keys in his hand, the particular readiness of a man who had been waiting for this moment for several years and was not going to waste a second of it now that it had arrived. "Mr. Thornton," Maya said, "are you sure about this?" He looked at her steadily from the doorway. "I've been sure since the day I filed that complaint and got a rubber stamp back in the mail." He pulled the door shut behind him and walked past her down the front path. "You said it's time. Let's go." Graham Ellis met them at a quiet conference room he used for sensitive interviews, a plain space with good natural light and no distractions. He had a single camera on a tripod and a colleague handling audio. He introduced himself to Thornton, shook his hand, and then stepped back and let Maya make the introduction. She said, "Mr. Thornton, this is your time. You say what you need to say. Nobody is going to edit your words or tell you what to emphasize. This is your account, all of it." Thornton sat down in front of the camera, straightened his collar, and folded his hands on the table. "Put the camera on me," he said. He spoke at length. Maya sat against the wall behind Graham and watched and did not say a word. She had heard Thornton's account at his kitchen table days earlier. She had heard it in detail, had taken notes, had used it to build a federal case. But hearing it in front of a camera was different. Hearing it the way the world was about to hear it was different. Thornton did not perform, he did not raise his voice or search for dramatic language or try to make himself sympathetic. He simply told the truth in the careful, precise way of a man who had taught other people to use words accurately for more than 30 years. He described the morning of the stop, the weather, the route he always took, the moment the lights came on behind him. He described Graves's hand on the holster before a single word had been spoken. He described standing on the side of the road with his documentation in his hand while Graves held it without reading it and looked at him the way nobody should ever be looked at. He described filing the complaint that same afternoon, writing it out in longhand, attaching the copies, mailing it to the address on the department website because he believed in the process. He described waiting several weeks for a response. He described opening the envelope and reading the 4 sentences that dismissed everything he had documented without a single specific acknowledgement of what he had written. He described putting the folder in his filing cabinet and driving past that same street corner every Sunday for several years. I kept waiting, he said quietly near the end. I kept thinking someone would come, someone with the tools to do something about it, someone the department couldn't just mail a form letter to and consider the matter closed. He looked directly into the camera. I kept every piece of paper because I knew this day would come. I just didn't know how long I'd have to wait for it. The room was completely silent when he finished. Graham cleared his throat quietly. Mr. Thornton, thank you. Thornton nodded once. He picked up his keys from the table and stood. The clip aired the following morning. By midday, it had been picked up nationally. By evening, a morning news anchor, a black woman in her 60s, had watched it live on air and paused for a long moment before she could continue. Maya watched it from her father's living room, watched Elias Thornton's face on the screen, watched more than 30 years of a schoolteacher's faith in a broken process sit quietly on camera, and refused to be anything less than completely dignified. Then she went to the kitchen. Victor was already there. He had set his old camera on a stack of books at the end of the table, angled toward the chair where Maya always sat. He had adjusted the lamp twice for the light. He stepped back when she came in and looked at her. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. She sat down. She looked into the lens. She thought about what she wanted to say and realized she did not need to organize it. It was already organized. It had been organizing itself since the morning the lights came on behind her on Cedarwood Lane. She talked for a long while, her enlistment at 18, 3 deployments, the friends she had lost and carried, coming home to her father's house and buying a red motorcycle because she needed an hour a day that belonged only to her, what that morning had meant. Riding to her mother's grave, riding home, the simple, uncomplicated freedom of it, what happened when the patrol car fell in behind her, what they tried to do to her record afterward, what they tried to do to Elias Thornton several years earlier, what they would keep doing to the next person and the person after that if nobody made a stop. She looked directly into the camera at the end. "I have a short time left on my leave. I'm going back to serve this country when that time is done. And I'm going to use every single day of it, making sure this department never does this to anyone again." Victor stopped the recording. The kitchen was quiet. "Post it," Maya said. She was asleep before midnight. By the time she woke up, it had millions of views. Veterans organizations had shared it. Civil rights groups had shared it. Gold Star families had shared it. Ordinary people had shared it with a single caption that required no elaboration. "Watch this." The consequences came fast. That was the thing nobody warned you about when you spent weeks building a case. The way the end, when it finally arrived, moved at a completely different speed than everything that had come before it. All that grinding, careful, methodical work, and then the walls came down in a matter of days, like they had never been walls at all. Graves was terminated on a Tuesday, not suspended, not placed on extended leave, terminated. The word used in the official department communication that Rachel forwarded to Maya that morning, along with a single line of her own, effective immediately. On the record, permanent. The department's own attorney had advised Chief Crow that defending Graves against Maya's jacket camera footage in federal court was not a viable legal strategy. The footage was clean and complete and directly contradicted every material claim in his official report. Falsification of an official report was not a gray area. It never had been. The department had spent 2 weeks pretending otherwise, and the arrival of the DOJ investigation had ended that particular pretense entirely. Graves's badge and service weapon were surrendered the same morning. His pension was placed under formal review pending the federal findings. Maya read the termination notice twice and set her phone down and looked out the kitchen window at the oak tree in the front yard and said nothing for a long moment. She had not expected to feel as much as she felt. Pierce resigned 2 days later before the department could move against him formally. Maya was not surprised. Pierce had always been a man who ran toward easy targets and away from accountability. The resignation fit the pattern perfectly. What he discovered quickly was that resigning did not close the door behind him. The DOJ investigation named him individually. A separate state-level review of the body camera malfunction pattern, which investigators had now traced back across multiple incidents involving both officers, resulted in a formal referral to the state attorney's office. The word being used in the referral, Rachel told Maya, was evidence tampering. Pierce had handed in his badge to escape consequences and walked directly into larger ones. Chief Crow announced his retirement on a Tuesday morning. The announcement used careful language about decades of service and the right time to pass the torch. The city council's response used equally careful language about transition planning and new leadership. Between those two careful statements, if you read them side by side the way Victor did at the kitchen table that morning, the message was unmistakable. The city manager's separate statement was less careful. It announced a full structural audit of the Cedarwood Heights Police Department, including its internal affairs processes, complaint handling procedures, and body camera maintenance records. An independent oversight committee would be established. Community input would be solicited. Victor read that last part aloud. Then he folded the paper, set it on the table, and picked up his coffee. 40 years, he said quietly. Not bitter, just marking it, acknowledging the distance between what should have been and what had taken this long to arrive. The Florida bar dismissed the grievance complaint against Rachel Monroe in a single sentence on a Friday morning, without merit. Rachel texted Maya the dismissal notice with no additional comment. Maya texted back 2 words, "File it." Rachel filed the federal civil rights suit the following Monday. The civil settlement came before trial. Given the weight of evidence, the DOJ investigation, and the sustained national attention the case had maintained, the city's attorneys recommended settlement within a month of the suit being filed. The amount was significant. Maya did not talk publicly about the number. That was not what any of this had been about. The community fund was Elias Thornton's idea. He had suggested it quietly, almost offhandedly, during one of the evening calls that had become a regular thing over the past weeks, a fund for residents who could document harm from the department's pattern of discriminatory stops. Rachel built it into the settlement terms. Elias Thornton was the first claimant processed. He called Maya the afternoon his claim was approved. She could hear in his voice that it was not about the money for him either. It was about the piece of paper, the formal written acknowledgement from the city, that his complaint had been real, that it had been mishandled, and that he had been right. Several years of keeping that folder on his kitchen table, and now there was a document that said it had mattered. "I'm going to frame it," he told her. "Good," she said. 5 days before Maya reported back to base, she woke up early, not because she had to, not because anything required her attention. She woke up the way she had woken up every morning of her leave, all the way, immediately, and lay still for a moment in her childhood bedroom, listening to the house. It was quiet. Victor was still sleeping. Outside, through the curtains, the sky was doing that thing it did in Florida just before the sun fully cleared the tree line, turning gold and wide and impossibly clean. She got up, put on her riding jacket and gloves, and went out to the driveway. The red Ducati sat in the early light exactly where it always sat. She went through her pre-ride check the same way she always did. Methodical, complete, unhurried. Tires, mirrors, controls. She did it every time, not because she expected to find something wrong, but because the discipline of checking was its own kind of respect. For the machine, for the road, for the fact that some things deserved your full attention. She heard the screen door behind her. Victor came out onto the porch in his robe, coffee in hand, and stood at the top of the steps. He looked at her the way he had looked at her across the kitchen table days earlier when she told him what she was going to do, the way he had looked at her when she left for her first deployment at 18, the patient, certain look of a man who knew his daughter completely and was not afraid of what she was capable of. She put her helmet on and fastened the chin strap. He raised his mug. She raised 2 fingers off the handlebar. She took the long way through Cedarwood Heights, past the corner of Cedarwood Lane where it had all started. She rode it slowly and looked at it. The same oak trees, the same clean sidewalks, the same quiet street. And felt something she had not felt here in weeks. Not the cold weight of that morning with the lights in her mirror. Something lighter than that, something that had replaced it. She passed Birchwood Drive. Slowed without stopping. Elias Thornton was in his front yard with a watering can, tending to the small garden along his front path. He looked up when he heard the engine. He raised one hand, slow, deliberate. The gesture of a man marking a moment he wanted to remember. She nodded back. Then she rode out toward the highway and opened the throttle and let the Ducati do what it was built to do. The engine answered the way it always answered, immediate, total, honest. The road opened up ahead of her, wide and straight and golden in the morning light. She was in her late 30s, she was active duty, she was going back. In a few days, she would be back on base, back in uniform, back in the life she had built for 15 years, the life two small men with badges had tried to take from her and discovered too late that they were nowhere near equipped to touch. She rode and did not think about any of it, she just rode. The engine beneath her, the air around her, the road ahead of her going on as far as she could see. She had never, not once in her life, not in any country, not in any room, not on any street, surrendered ground she was entitled to hold. She was not about to start now.